How's it going, everyone? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Chaos Head Noah. I can't even begin to describe what happened in the last episode. It was a lot. I think things truly are beginning to ramp up. Obviously, things are still crazy and confusing, but it really took a whole nother step in the last episode. Rimi showing off that she is indeed a gigalomaniac, and she seems to have a pretty good control on her power, as she was able to pull off a really big delusion, real booted only to Senna, who she was fighting. And we found out that Senna's father was that hobo that we saw, like, I don't know, like 1 or 2 times prior, one in a flashback, maybe another time somewhere else. And apparently, her father was involved in a very crazy experiment which has led to Project Noah 2 or whatever the hell it's called. And that experiment was completely screwed up. I can't even begin to truly describe the details. We'll just leave it at that. And now we're here after that flashback to the experiment. After everything had settled, Senna had gone on to interrogate Kozupi about something with bloodshot eyes. And then after doing that for a bit, she ran off somewhere on her own. Kozupi had chased after her, but I, meanwhile, had just been staying put, still incredibly confused as to why Senna had become so obsessive all of a sudden. And now I was trudging to Kitazawa, let's go with that. My parents' house was only a short distance away. Walking from my base to it took less than half an hour. Could Nanami be there? Though not as busy as Shibuya itself, the roads of Kitazawa were fairly crowded. I was still being hit by the aftermath of that Esper debacle, namely, some passers-by looked at me with mocking sneers, while others even took pictures of me on their phones. Overwhelmed by embarrassment and humiliation, I hurried along the road to home. Rimi's eyes were pointed to the ground as she said that. She was walking a bit behind me, and in the time we'd spent moving along, she'd already repeated those words over 10 times. No matter how much she apologized, I had no way of answering. I didn't know anything about Rimi. Nothing had changed ever since we'd first met. And yet, she supported me. She stayed by my side. But at the end of the day, there was still so much I didn't know about her. Even so, I'd always brushed that issue out of my mind. Perhaps it was because something in me knew that she wouldn't stay with me if I knew the truth. And that terrified me. I worked up the courage and asked her what was on my mind. I asked her the reason why she would stay with a guy like me. Was it because she was trying to lure me into a trap the entire time, just like Yua had? And yet, despite my suspicions, the answer she gave was nothing of the sort. Didn't want me to awaken? Like as a gigalomaniac? Rimi knew more about me than I did. Rimi hesitated a little. In other words, she was telling me to stop pushing? But there was no way I could stop there. Which was it? Was she trying to dodge the question? She didn't say from who. I wonder. I truly wonder. Lies, telling me it was all lies, was a lie in and of itself. I could tell just from looking at her. I was about to ask more, but I held my tongue. Are you my enemy or are you my friend? Depending on the answer, I might not have been able to stay with Rimi, so I didn't ask. If I pretended that nothing had happened, I could keep on deceiving myself just as I had been up until now. That way, it might be easier for me. Happier, even. Okay, that was what I was gonna do. I was gonna keep on... I was gonna keep being ignorant. And keep living a lie told by Rimi. You know, ignorance truly is bliss. Rimi had saved my ass so many times already, so there was no way any harm would come to me if I did that. I deserved to live a normal life, just like she'd said.
Arigatou.
I averted my eyes from her and swapped out my question for a few words of gratitude.
守ってくれて。
I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I just continued walking toward my parents' house in silence. Yeah, whether she has a hidden vendetta or whatever, you know, she did save Takumi, and I think that should be acknowledged. My eyes were eventually met with a familiar alleyway. It was a quiet, secluded residential area. Every now and then I could hear the faint sound of a train in the distance. I'd known this specific chunk of scenery ever since I was a little kid. This was where I'd grown up. I'd walked to both elementary school and middle school using this alleyway. If I headed through the narrow alleyway in front of me, my house would be right there. I was scared of seeing Nanami again, but I had to know for certain whether her arm was still there. I stopped and took a deep breath to calm myself. And then right when I was about to start walking again, the house isn't going to be there, is it?
待って。
I turned around to see Rimi on the verge of tears.
どうしても行くの。ねえ、行かないで。もう普通じゃいられなくなるよ。私そんなの嫌だな。
What was that supposed to...
帰ろう。あのコンテナハウスに帰ろう。私タクが望む限りずっと一緒にいるから。それで一緒に学校に行って大臣と3人で他愛もない話をして、帰りに立ち食いそば屋さんとか CD ショップとかに寄って、そうやってこれからもやっていこうよ。
僕はナナミに会わなくちゃ。
いないよ、きっと。
Why was she so sure? Or was it just another lie? Would something bad happen to me if I went home?
私タクの悲しむ顔見たくない。
Oh, bucko, I've been sad. I am sad incarnate. So you say.
もう謎かけみたいなことはやめてよ。
I'd had enough. She was telling me to stay ignorant forever? I couldn't go on like this, pretending like I knew nothing. Of course I couldn't. Each and every person I knew just kept hitting me with non-stop cryptic nonsense. It never ended. Yeah, this is actually a little bit of a change in Takumi that we saw since the very beginning, because if he was offered ignorance is bliss as a way of just living a normal life, I'm sure he'd take that up. I really did want to stay ignorant. I really did. Yeah, there you go.
実家に行っちゃいけない理由があるなら言ってよ。こんな中途半端なのうんざりなんだ。
Sick of it? Did I have any right to say that? Wasn't I the one who always half-assed everything? Who never said what I really meant? Wasn't I the one who always ran away from everything? Yeah, I was. All the more reason to just keep doing that from now until forever. It was time to go home. Rimi was right. I didn't need to see Nanami at all. If I was planning on checking whether she had her right hand or not, then what the hell would I do if she didn't? Wouldn't that be all my fault? Nanami would hate me, resent me. All it would have done was solidify that I was a pathetic loser that couldn't even save his own little sister. If I left everything up in the air like it was now, I wouldn't have to be loaded with guilt. So that was what I'd do. It was the optimal choice. Don't look at anything. No matter how many mysteries come your way, ignore them. Shut yourself away from the world.
ほんと世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないと何にもできないんだから。
ダメだ。
Yeah, I don't know what to really think here. Nanami's cheerful voice popped into my head.
ダメだよ。
If I ran away now, I wouldn't be able to face Nanami for the rest of my life. I wouldn't be able to go back home for the rest of my life.
Taku.
I clenched my fists and stepped forward into the narrow alleyway that led to my parents' house. I was less than 50 meters away now. At first I just speed walked, then I started running toward the home I'd been raised in. 30 meters to go. 20 meters, 10 meters, 0 meters. And when I looked at the house, I knew. Oh, it's still there. Was gone? Well, there's something here. The name on the doorplate was wrong. It wasn't Nishijo. In fact, the entire shape of the house was wrong. It was far newer and nicer than the home I'd lived in. I looked around. I wonder if I'd mistaken one of the neighboring houses for mine. But I hadn't. Actually, none of the surrounding scenery lined up with my memories. I considered that maybe I'd gotten lost or taken the wrong alley, but there was no way that could have happened. I'd recognized the entire route until now. I knew for a fact I remembered the route. But my home wasn't at the end of it. After taking the path from my memories, the scenery that should have been there hadn't appeared, and a completely unfamiliar one had instead. The what? What should have been a familiar place felt like I was setting foot in it for the first time.
斜面ビューだ。
違うよ。
Rimi stood right behind me. She had denied my words immediately.
この世界に
Oh.
タクの帰る場所はないの。
Due to the divergence? The world diverged, right? The sunset illuminated the lone corridor of the hospital. The lights were not turned on in the short period before night fell, rendering it fairly dim. Are you going to see some Shogun? The clamor of dinner time from before had calmed, and an eerie silence descended in its place. Shogun was slowly traveling down the corridor in his wheelchair. The creaking of the wheels echoed throughout the empty hall. Many nurses passed him by, but none spoke to him, nor even so much as glanced his way. Acting as though this was perfectly normal, Shogun continued to spin the wheels with his hands, emaciated skin and bone as they were. Well, there's that guy. When he passed in front of one of the rooms, a male patient known as Yamai called out to him. He pointed at him with his index finger, sounding a frantic cry. Together with Yamai, the nurse had a face of complete befuddlement.
アミちゃんが帰ってきたよ。またお外に出かけてたんだ。いけないんだ。
誰もいませんよ。
The nurse looked around and then looked at the man with a forced smile on her face. Despite the fact that Shogun was passing through the corridor right before her very eyes, the nurse spoke as if there was no one there at all.
また山井さんは私のことからかってるんでしょう。でも今日は騙されませんからね。
アミちゃん、ラウミちゃん、タウミちゃん。
Yamai became increasingly worked up as he continued to cry out. He listed off 3 different names. Shogun simply ignored him and silently turned right at the end of the hallway. Haha. The wall, which had been cream-colored up until that very moment, suddenly changed to black. And yet, even though that wall stood right in front of him, Shogun did not halt his wheelchair. Right before he was about to collide with it, the black wall suddenly vanished. It quite literally had vanished. After the wall disappeared, a hidden corridor appeared from beyond its past reign. Shogun continued straight through it. He traveled another 20 meters before finally reaching a true dead end. Kind of sus. At that dead end was a lone door to a hospital room. Shogun opened the door and headed inside. It was the Phantom Hospital Room, the ghost story whispered about for many years, the tale of a room nobody knew of. And the person hospitalized within it, the name written upon the nameplate was Nishijo Takumi. Yep, haha. I kind of remember that from the anime. Some things are beginning to come back. Something. I'm not going to talk about him. I'm trying to forget about him. Because the anime was hot garbage. I actually watched like the first half of the first episode recently. Like I rewatched it. Because I was far enough along where I was like, yeah, there's no way I'd come across any spoilers or anything. And man, just even the first half, they did everything so fucking wrong. I don't know how they were able to accomplish that, but they just messed it up so bad. From the train windows, an indigo blue could be seen permeating the sky. Words. The trains of the Yamanote line grew chaotic as businessmen and students alike made their way back to their homes. Two of its passengers, Kusunoki Yua and Yasuji Ban, stood shoulder to shoulder as they shook along with the commuting train, holding on to its hanging straps for stability. They were admittedly an odd pair, and perhaps due to how much they stood out, Yua had been feeling constant gazes coming from all around her. It would stand to reason that this was why she was repeatedly fidgeting with her hair and glasses. She still was not yet acquainted enough with the detective Bond to strike up a casual conversation with him. She had only met him a few days prior, after all. Shinjuku was only a single station away from Shibuya, and yet the 3 minutes it took to reach there felt helplessly longer than they should have. Bond simply stood silently, gazing out the window. He made no attempt to speak with Yua. Yua's current impression of Bond was that he did not seem to be a bad person, but that he was still somewhat frightening. She had met other detectives that were on the case involving her sister, but none of them had left an especially good impression. Perhaps that had left her with an unconscious prejudice against detectives, and by extension Bond. Or so she had concluded in her introspection.
だから地下15階の番人倒せば隠しダンジョン行けるだろ常識的に考えて
Oh, we got some gamers on here.
番人どこにいるかわからんなり
Ever since the two of them had boarded the train at Shinjuku Station, two men standing near the door had been talking in an excessively loud manner. Regardless of her desires, Yua was forced to listen to those two talking loud as could be, all without an ounce of consideration for those around them.
マップの左端の方だよ一目でわかるだろ番人
っていうか番人と警官の区別つかないぞなもし
There is a difference. A very slight difference, but also maybe a cultural one? Maybe? I don't know.
いやいやどう見ても番人だろどこが警官なんだよ番人は銃持ってねえよ
Don't thieves just steal? Bandits, they do a little bit more than that. Both of them wore plain clothes, bandanas, fingerless gloves, and bulging rucksacks on their backs. The two were a pair of so-called otakus. Yua herself was interested and thus consumed both anime and manga, so it was not her appearances, or their appearances, that left her surprised. She had simply never been to Akihabara before, so it was her first time seeing a stereotypical otaku, complete with the clothes and everything. Yeah, whenever I went to Anime Expo over in LA a few years ago, yeah, that was a little bit of a eye-opener. I saw a lot of people that I had the same interests in, but they were so much more outward with those interests, and it was kind of hard to keep up. Not that I try to keep my interests on the down low, I just don't like blurt them out like these two otakus are. Realizing her curious glances were quite rude, she quickly averted her eyes. In the seat directly in front of her, a high school girl with brown hair and a navy blue blazer was typing a message on her cell phone. Her gaudy artificial nails tapped the screen rapidly, and every time her fingers moved, the cell phone strap of a pistol swung back and forth. Oh, how edgy. How edgy. Naturally, Yua had seen the contents of her message. This was not through any fault of her own, however. The girl was holding her phone horizontally, giving everyone around her free rein to see everything she wrote. It was so easy to see, in fact, it was almost as if she wanted Yua to see it. Well, what did it say? What the fuck? What? Okay, so, like, yesterday, something mixer with, what the fuck? I feel like I'm having a stroke trying to read this. Despite being a high school girl herself, Yua could not even begin to grasp the contents of the message. It was possible that it could have been Gyaru speak, but to her it looked like nothing short of a coded message. Originally I thought it was. Yeah, honestly, I feel like people... That has to be more effort to type like that than to not. You know, back in the day when we had the, shit, what is it called? I guess the keyboards or number pads that you would see on cell phones at the time. Flip phones were all the rage before they had those sliding phones and other variations that had like full-on keyboards that you could actually, you know, text a lot faster. Shorthand was definitely a necessity, but I don't know, that still seems like that's a lot of work. All of a sudden, the voice of a child rang through the train's interior, or throughout it. Startled, Yua turned toward the source of the sound. A lone boy, about 5 years of age, stood right beside Bon. He held a squirt gun in his hand, its muzzle pointed straight at Bon. The boy even pulled the trigger, but no water came out from the end of it. Bon gave the child a big smile. His eyes, meanwhile, told a different story. However, despite the message Bon attempted to convey, the child showed no intention of stopping. A woman, likely his mother, rushed to her son's side. She turned toward Bon and politely bowed. See, you do that in public over here in America, and your ass is getting thrown to the ground and beaten. The mother scolded her son in an attempt to make him stop, or depending on where you're at, you'll get a fucking, like, parade or something for you. But her reprimanding never extended beyond verbal. She did not take the water gun from him, nor did she attempt to grab his hand. I do. I fucking beat the shit out of him. If a kid was doing that to me, I swear I'd probably just grab his face and fucking slam it into the ground. Well, probably not, because then I'd get in massive ass trouble, but still, I'd probably just, like, be super fucking annoyed. I'd probably take the gun and just, like, break it or something. I'm sure I'd be able to do that. I don't think I'd get in trouble for that. I'd probably start recording to make sure that I've got, like, a cover-up or something, because no witnesses are gonna help me. Remember, America. To Yua, the scene seemed very unnatural. The mother was clearly angry at her child and showed an apologetic demeanor toward Bon. But that was the only thing normal about it. The boy remained completely indifferent and unresponsive, simply choosing to repeat the same word over and over again. And yet, despite his inaction, the mother made no attempts to stop him with anything other than words. I feel like this is going to be like from that one anime where the guy was doing the finger guns and he actually was able to kill people that way. And for some reason, Bon simply sat there and let the boy do as he pleased. Yeah, those aren't italicized anymore. In the end, the scene continued on until they arrived at Shibuya Station. That has to be foreshadowing for something. It has to be. Upon coming to a full stop at the station, the train doors opened, but the mother and son showed no signs that they intended to disembark. Relieved, Yua exited onto the platform along with Bon. Taking a peek at his expression, she saw a clearly forced smile sitting upon his face.
お急ぎ中のお客様にお知らせいたします。地下鉄番号門線。失礼しました。半蔵門線は人身事故の影響でただいま振り替え運転を行っております。
Excuse me? Jesus Christ.
お客様には大変ご迷惑をおかけして申し訳ございません。
最近よく感じるんだが。
A crowd of people came and went throughout the platform. As Bon walked through along with the crowd, toward the Hachiko gate, he began whispering to Yua.
まるで不特定多数の人間にストーカーされてるような気がするんだよな。
どういうことですか？
さっきみたいなことがよくあるって話さ。周囲の人間の何気ない行動が まるで自分への嫌がらせじゃねえかって思えてくるわけ。
And this was the reason why Bon had shown no reaction to the boy's mischief. Events such as those, ones that did not present much trouble, were becoming an everyday occurrence for him. Once he had begun picking up on it, it made it difficult for him to stay of sound mind.
まあ、考えすぎだろうが、俺みたいな地味なおっさんに興味があるやつなんてそうそういねえだろうし。ただ、集団ストーカーってのは確かに存在するんだよな。
Gang stalking, let's see it. An organized form of stalking. Despite what the name implies, it does not mean that a group of people simply follow a victim. Instead, it refers to repeat minor offenses, often various forms of harassment, perpetrated against an individual by several individuals. In some cases, the harassment is done with such utter sophistication, the victim has no way to perceive that the many incidences connected. Specific examples of the— God damn, this is a big-ass tip, what the fuck? Specific examples of this harassment may include a victim being repeatedly bumped into by various people they don't know, a car honking endlessly in front of the victim's house late at night, people the victim has never met before alluding to private information only the victim should know, etc. Even though each of these offenses are not a cause for worry when viewed alone, if they continue to occur several times a day over the course of several months, the victim will begin to deteriorate mentally, and this eventually results in the victim growing terrified of everything around them, even the most mundane things that weren't actually intended to be a part of the stalking effort, and no longer being able to trust anyone. However, there is a very fine line between actual gang stalking and someone suffering from a persecution complex, so identifying gang stalking as such must be done with extreme caution. And we know what this is, or at least I do. I went to school.
普通のストーカー行為とは何が違うんですか？
被害を受けてる側からすると、相手の意図や目的、正体すら全くわかんねえんだ。ただ、誰かに行く先々で毎日のように様々な嫌がらせを受けていると感じる。集団ストーカーってのはそういうもんだ。
ただの考えすぎっていう可能性は？
十分にあり得るだろうな。脅迫観念と紙一重だ。俺の場合はそうでもなさそうなんだけどな。ここ数日は相手もかなり直接的な手段に出てきてやがる。
と言いますと？
手を引けって脅迫する匿名の電話が何度かかかってきてな。
For some reason, Bon laughed as he told her that. Yua, however, was frightened and wrapped her arms around herself in an attempt to bring her comfort.
それ大丈夫なんですか？
まあ、デカにはよくあることさ。
Upon saying that, Bon immediately stiffened his expression and looked at Yua.
ユアちゃんは最近そんなようなことはないかい？
はい。ないと思います。
身の回りでちょっとでも違和感を覚えることがあったらすぐにおじさんに言ってくれ。ユアちゃんの身の安全を守るのは警察の仕事だからな。
はい。
Having listened to his words, Yua realized she was involved in something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Oh yeah, most definitely on that one.
あなたは妄想の存在なんだよ。
Yeah, I haven't been told that one yet, but it was definitely somewhere on the list. The list of insults, that is. Her voice a whisper, Rimi had said something nonsensical. Ignoring what she'd said, I glanced at the various houses around me. In this place, well rooted in my memories, in this place I couldn't seem to recognize. Houses that should have been there were nowhere to be seen. Houses that shouldn't have been there were all I could see. The gap, the disparity between what I knew in my memories and the real scenery surrounding me was getting wider and wider. Yelling those thoughts out loud, I desperately denied the despair welling up in my heart. Yeah, there wasn't any gap. Not in the slightest. I'd just taken a wrong turn. That was the right street. Or this wasn't. It was just a misunderstanding on my part. There was nothing wrong with the world. To think otherwise would be ridiculous. Stumbling my way back down the street I'd come from, I burst into the neighboring alleyway. But just as I'd feared, between my memories and what I actually saw, something felt out of place. I realized that my entire body was soaked in sweat. My eyes refused to focus and my feet didn't feel well secured to the ground. All those feelings together hit me with an intense wave of nausea.
なんでだよ。ここに僕の家があるのは間違いないんだ。僕はいつもここから小学校にも中学校にも通ってたんだ。小学校にはナナミと手をつないで登校してたし、中学は自転車で。
どこの中学校？
Rimi, who had been following me, quietly asked a simple question.
どこって？
なんていう学校？
そんなの決まってるじゃないか。地元の。
It's,
あれ、
I couldn't remember. I'd gone to middle school. I had clear memories of it, but I couldn't remember any of the finer details. It was as if some intense haze was covering my mind. The name of my middle school, which class I'd been a part of, or even the name of my homeroom teacher. No specific names came to me.
そんなはずないんだ。ただ忘れてるだけで。
タク、聞いて。あなたの記憶にあるのは、この場所に家があるじゃなくて、この場所に家があるはずっていう思い込み。そうでしょ？
My sanity was hanging on by a thread.
だって僕はここに来るまでの道は覚えてるんだぞ。おかしいじゃないか。
それは作られた記憶だから。
Fabricated, huh? Stop making that face. Rimi's eyes were pointed straight at the ground and she looked terribly sad. Without looking up at me, she just continued saying the most confusing, nonsensical things. Things that, once again, I didn't understand. Things that were impossible to understand. So I stopped trying.
タクは中学には通ってないの？
わかったぞ。これドッキリでしょ。そうなんでしょ。きっとあれだ。そう、リミとナナミが実は知り合いとかで僕を二人して騙そうとしてるんだ。なんだ。そうか。ビビった。
I tried my best to laugh it off, but Rimi didn't even so much as chuckle.
ごめん。私、これからあなたを傷つけることを言わなくちゃ。タク、あなたはね、本来いちゃいけない存在なんだよ。
Oh yeah.
嘘つくな!
She was just trying to deceive me. Rimi was my enemy, just like all the others.
貼り付けはリミの仕業だな!
If that was true, then what had happened at the crime scene when I'd first met her hadn't been a delusion. The true culprit behind NewGen wasn't the man I had seen on the hospital TV earlier today. It was Rimi. She had been monitoring me the entire time. She knew I'd witnessed everything, so she refused to let me out of her sight. Also, I would never tell anyone else what I'd seen. That was the sole reason she'd bothered staying with me all this time.
君はあの時血まみれだった。だから君が犯人だ。
あれはあなたの望んだ妄想。ギガロマニアックスの妄想はね、強すぎる場合、時に混じり合うの。妄想がシンクロするんだ。
Calmly, as though she was talking to herself, Rimi spoke. And yet her composure only served to piss me off even more. Oh, come on, dude, no.
少なくともあの時、あの場所では4つの妄想がシンクロしてた。タクと、私と、ニュージェネの犯人と。
信じるもんか!
Come on, who's the fourth? Before she can continue, I cut her off. I then covered my ears and closed my eyes.
これは妄想だ。そうだよ、妄想なんだ。いつもしているみたいな。
I'm not choosing any of these. I am not. I am sorry, but we need to hear this shit.
妄想はしないで。
She spoke in a quiet yet serious imperative tone. I gulped.
でないと私、タクを消さなくちゃいけなくなる。
殺すの？
A chill ran down my spine. My perception of Rimi, the girl I thought would save me, was rapidly spiraling. Now she was turning into someone completely unrecognizable to me.
殺すんだな！やっぱり君が殺人犯なんだ！
So why? Why did she look so... Biting her lip as she fought back tears, hanging her head low as could be. It all made me hesitant to accuse her of anything. Tell me it's all a lie. Tell me it's all a prank so we can laugh it off. If you do, we can go back to how it used to be between us. I want to go back.
だったら僕は何なの？
ギガロマニアックスの妄想によって作られた人間かな。
バカらしい。僕にはちゃんと記憶があるんだ。中学の頃の細かい記憶は思い出せないけど、忘れちゃっただけで。
あなたが生まれたのは1年半前なの。
Oh yeah? A year and a half ago? That would have been when I just started high school.
だったら僕は1歳半の赤ん坊っていうことじゃないか。バブ言ってなくちゃおかしい。
タクは生まれた瞬間からタクだった。
君がその目で見たって言いたいの？確かに僕らは1年半前から友達だったらしいね。僕は覚えてないけど。
私とあなたが会ったのは1ヶ月前。貼り付けの現場。私はもともと水明の生徒じゃないから。
Rimi was a complete schizo. A complete and utter schizo, just like all the others. No, not just schizo, super schizo. She was at a tier not even Seno or Ayase could hope to match.
誰が僕を妄想したの？言ってみてよ。
西条匠くんだよ。
入ったアウト！僕が妄想なんでしょ？その僕が妄想して僕を作ったって矛盾してるじゃないか。はい論破終了。
No. Let her cook.
それとも君の妄想？君が勝手に作り出した君だけの脳内設定なんでしょ？僕をそれに巻き込まないでよ。
私だってタクには知ってほしくなかった。ここにも来てほしくなかった。もっと強く引き止めればよかったね。
Then gathering her resolve, Rimi raised her head and looked straight at me. Her eyes glimmered with sincerity. It didn't seem like she was lying. She felt entirely genuine.
でもここまで来たら本当のことを知ってもらった方がいいと思う。
But it wasn't the truth. It was all a lie. It had to be. Otherwise, my last thread of sanity would snap. Besides, who would ever believe someone who suddenly decided to hit them with, oh yeah, BT dubs, you're a delusion.
あなたの行動が他の人の命を削っていくんだって知ってもらった方が。
そうだ。ナナミは？僕が妄想だったら僕と血が繋がってるナナミも両親も妄想ってこと？そんなの無茶苦茶。
ナナちゃんはいるよ。
From the way Rimi talked about her, it was almost as if she knew her.
ナナミを誘拐したのは君なの？
似たようなものかもね。私はタクを守ることに気を取られすぎてナナちゃんが狙われる可能性を考えてなかった。私は誘拐犯のこと知ってる。
She really was a demon girl. I was right. I'd always been right. Rimi was the only one I'd wanted to be on my side. And even though I'd always believed that, there had always been more than enough reasons to doubt her. And yet even so, I'd feigned ignorance and simply trusted that she'd keep her promise to stay by my side. But despite all that, just like Yua, Rimi was...
君も僕を裏切るんだね。
そうだね。私はタクを裏切った。隠し事たくさんしてた。ごめんね。私のこと恨んでいいよ。
謝られたって。僕は信じない。信じられない。
Despite my words, it was impossible for me to prove that I was real. All the supernatural things I'd seen up until now flashed through my mind, and that's when I knew I couldn't just laugh off her words as some insane asshole. As I thought that, Rimi slowly began to approach me and then embrace me. Taken completely by surprise, I surrendered myself to her. I could feel her warmth. She had saved me. She had saved my soul. She had taught me nothing but kindness. But now, despite being in the center of her embrace, her warmth could not have felt more distant.
そろそろ行かなきゃ。
行くって、どこへ？
ナナちゃんをさらった誘拐犯のところ。決着つけなくちゃいけないの。ナナちゃんのことも他のこともこのままだとタクも守りきれないし。
そんなの無責任だ。僕にここまでひどいこと言っておいて逃げるの。
Rimi started inching away from me, one step, then another. Slowly she distanced herself.
戻ってくるから。タクは部屋にいて。そしたらまた一緒にいろいろ楽しいお話ししよう。あなたはあそこにいてもいいんだよ。
Such a gentle tone. Even though she had said all those cruel things, why was she still being so nice to me?
でも一つだけ約束。もう妄想はしない。ね。タクの妄想力はとっても強いから、妄想すればするほど本物のあなたの命が削られていっちゃうんだ。
何を？
それじゃあまた明日。石。
Rimi struck a pose, saluting me with the most unnatural smile on her face. It could not have been more forced. And only a moment later, from her eyes, quiet tears began to fall. Rimi frantically turned her back to me, and as her shoulders started to tremble, she ran away. And I, having been left behind in a stupor, sank helplessly to my knees.
本物の僕ってなんだよ。僕は偽物じゃない。
All color vanished from the world. All hope I'd once had was gone. My very existence had been denied. There was no meaning in me being here. Not even my death held any meaning. Rimi had left me, leaving behind a meaningless husk. She was my enemy. She had deceived me. And now, having said her piece, she had probably lost her final remaining reason to be with me.
戻ってくるはずない。
Rimi had abandoned me. But of course she had. I was a delusionary existence, according to her, a monster. Forget it. I didn't care anymore. With no willpower to even stand up, I just stayed there, still unable to organize my thoughts, incapable of crying due to the sheer shock. The twilight wind robbed me of all warmth, and the very little that remained of Rimi's faded completely. As I looked up at the sky for no particular reason, I gazed at the sunset, a sunset that had almost been completely eroded by the dark of night. Wow, all right. We had a lot dumped on us right there.
これが新作？またへんてこね。
All right, we'll get to that next episode, but so okay. I'm gonna say some things. I might be a little overzealous here, jumping the gun if you will, but I'm going to believe Rimi. I think she is on our side. I think she's actually good. now that we have a little bit more information, I can kind of place her somewhere. And I think she's on the good side, because she pointed out that there is an antagonist, and that is probably the guy that's doing this Noah 2 bullshit. And as we, probably could piece together, also has his hands on Nanami. The finer details I don't know in any of this, but I will say that, yeah, I can also accept that there is another Takumi out there. A real one, that we can now call him. I don't know if that's Shogun, and there's always been 2 of us. A delusionary one that we've been following along this entire time, and then Shogun, who's apparently the original of us. I don't know. There's a lot that I can't really say for certain, but I'm going to say that, yeah, we were created from Shogun, and here we are. And Rimi has a mission to keep an eye on us, to befriend us, for whatever reason, whatever her goal is in the long run, whatever Shogun's goal is in the long run, or whoever created Takumi here. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but there's got to be a reason behind everything, right? So, yeah, some thoughts are kind of coming back from the anime. I'm not trying to say what I think I remember from the anime, because if I am right, then I'm just spoiling, and I don't want to do that. I'm really just kind of piecing together what I can from what I just saw, and I think that's all of it. And also, I just wanted to point out that this kind of reminded me of the prologue of Kingdom Hearts 2. I don't know if there's any Kingdom Hearts fans here, but there was a very similar scene between the main character in the prologue and another character, and he was basically told that, yeah, you don't really exist, man. You're not supposed to either. And I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of that. Oh, I don't even know what to say. It's still very confusing, but I think we're finally beginning to see some light in what's actually happening here. Believe it or not, after all this time, we're now in the 9th chapter. After all this fucking time, we're beginning to see some light, if you will. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you all for watching this episode. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz, and I will see you all in the next one. Take it easy.